Okay, so Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We are now in the new chapter, chapter 3, transport and circulation, right? So in this chapter, what we are going to cover are basically the cardiovascular system. So we are looking at into the heart, the detailed structure of the heart, and also blood vessels, the structure and function of blood vessel. Okay, so a part of that, we are going also to touch about a little bit knowledge related to cardiovascular disease. Okay, and then how our heart functioning, what are the factors that cause ataupun regulating the heart rhythm. So these are all covered in this chapter, cardiovascular system. Okay, so then we are moving into lymphatic system, right? And also transportation in plants. Okay, so I guess with these 2 hours that we have, we may be able to cover up until the cardiovascular system. Okay, sorry, cardiovascular disease. All right. Okay, so why is transport and circulation is very important? So every organism basically must exchange material with environment. Okay, with environment. So this happen in the cellular level, but different organism has different way of exchange of material. For unicellular organism, basically they just need, or they just what we call it, requires simple diffusion to exchange of the material between the cell and external environment, like this amoeba. So diffusion only alone is enough, right, to support the exchange of material. But okay, for multicellular or complex organism, diffusion alone is not adequate, right? Tidak memadai ataupun tidak mencukupi for the transport of materials, right, within the body, right? That is why specialized circulatory system is required to, so that it can interact every organ system in the body. So there are two types of circulatory system: open circulatory system and closed circulatory system. So what we are going to focus on is this closed circulatory system, where this system is confined in a closed vessel. So whatever the internal environment will be not mixed with the surrounding or external environment, right? Which it is differ to the open circulatory system, right? So you have learned back in your school, open circulatory system, basically they are going to have a mixture of component in the circulatory system and also of the body tissue, right? So usually this kind of open circulatory system found in insects lah, for example, that you have learned, grasshopper. Kan, all right? So our focus will be the closed circulatory system. Okay, so what are the function, right? Before we explore more on the cardiovascular system, right? So you need to know what are the function of having cardiovascular system. Okay, so the keyword for function, right, of circulatory system in vertebrates are transport. The keyword is to transport, which to transport nutrient, number one. Transport nutrient from the digestive system, from the storage depot to the cell, right? So nutrient that is stored to be transported to specific cell. Number two, circulatory system help to transport gases, right? Or oxygen, for example, and carbon dioxide from the respiratory structure like gills, lung to the cells. Okay. Next, circulatory system help to transport metabolic waste or the byproduct of metabolism like nitrogenous waste and whatnot, okay, from the cell to organs that will secrete them. Okay, next, to transport hormone, right? So circulatory system had to transport hormone from the endocrine gland, the gland that secrete the hormone, to the specific target tissue. For example, we have pituitary gland, right, down at the back of our brainstem over there, all right? So we have pituitary gland. So pituitary gland secretes specific hormone, And that hormone is not acting on the brain. It might be acting on the heart. It might be acting to the uterus and so on. All right. So you can see that it has different target cell. So how it managed to travel, right? The hormone managed to move along the body. So it travels along the circulatory system. And lastly, circulatory system help to maintain fluid balance. All right. So these are among major function of vertebrate circulatory system. Okay. All right. Okay. Next, mammalian cardiovascular system overview. Right. So this is something that you have knowledge prior to your CFS, right? So you actually has been introduced with cardiovascular system before. Okay. So our heart, okay, have 4 chambers: the right atrium, the right ventricle, the left atrium, and the left ventricle. All right. So these chambers, right, of the heart is connected by blood vessels, where some part of the blood vessel carry deoxygenated blood. For example, we have here vena cava. So vena cava, we have anterior vena cava that came from the upper part of the body, and posterior vena cava from the lower part of the body that carry or brings the deoxygenated blood back to the heart, right? From to the side, right side of the heart, to the right atrium, and then to the right ventricle, and the deoxygenated blood later on will be transported out of the heart via pulmonary artery. Okay, so from pulmonary artery, the deoxygenated blood then will load oxygen in the lung. Right? Thus, it become oxygenated blood. So the oxygenated blood then return back to the heart via pulmonary veins. Okay, then going to the left atrium, right, to the left ventricle before it is pumped out of the heart to the rest of the body via aorta. All right, so this is somehow the structure and the pathway of blood along the heart and the circulatory system. Okay, so this is just an overview. Okay, so next we are going into the detailed structure of the heart and the different thickness of the wall in the heart, right? And how it relates to the function. Okay, right, the next LO. All right, so you can see that the human heart is located within the thoracic cavity, and it is separated from the abdominal cavity with the presence of diaphragm. Okay. All right, so again, we have the detailed structure of the heart. So we have the left ventricle over there. So this is the left side of the heart. So this is the right side of the heart. Okay, so we have the left ventricle, and that is semilunar valve. So semilunar valve is the valve that can be found in the blood vessel that carry the blood out of the heart. For example, it can be found here, right, in the pulmonary artery and also aorta. Okay, all right. So that is semilunar valve. Okay, next we have the aorta also have descending aorta, right? Meaning that it's actually curvy to the back of the heart, right? That sending the blood down to the lower body. Okay, then we have here vena cava. So we have superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, or just now we have anterior and also posterior. Sama je maksud dia. All right, that brings the deoxygenated blood to the heart, right? And then the blood will be then go to the right atrium. From the right atrium, then it goes, it flows into the right ventricle through a valve. that known as atrioventricular valve, right? Atrioventricular valve. So you can, you can use prefix of AV valve to represent atrioventricular valve. Okay, right? So you can use AV valve in exam. Okay, next. Right, so we have here the pulmonary artery. Okay, and then that is pulmonary vein, right? That brings the oxygenated blood back to the heart. Okay, then the blood will flow into the left atrium, then to the left ventricle through another valve, sama juga nama dia, atrioventricular valve. Okay, right. So what you can see now, we have atrioventricular valve and we have semilunar valve. So atrioventricular valve ada dua, on the right side of the heart and also on the left side. So similar goes to the semilunar valve. So atrioventricular valve is the general name, right? General name. So specific name of atrioventricular valve, right, is this, where you have here, right? This is the right side of the heart. We have tricuspid valve, ni, on the right side of the heart. And on the left side of the heart, the specific name of the AV valve is bicuspid valve or mitral valve. So this is specific name. So make sure in case in exam, you've been exposed with tricuspid valve. So ataupun if you answered tricuspid valve, specifically to explain or to describe the right side, the valve on the right side of the heart. So you will get correct for that lah, right? But in case you answered, the question is labeled with the AV valve on the right side of the heart, but you answered it as bicuspid valve, then you will get wrong lah. Okay, all right. All right, so you can see here, this is the tricuspid valve, right? And this is the bicuspid valve, or we call as mitral valve. Okay, as for semilunar valve also do have specific name, right? For the semilunar valve in the aorta, we call as aortic valve. Okay, right? And for the valve, semilunar valve found in the pulmonary artery, we call it as pulmonary valve. Okay, right. And you can see very clear from here, the left ventricle is actually having thicker wall compared to the right ventricle, right? So why is that need to be having a thicker wall compared to the right ventricle? Okay, before that, both atria have thin wall compared to ventricles. Why? Because atria function as collection chambers to collect the blood that return to the heart. So atria ni just sebagai penerima darah sahaja daripada daripada blood vessel. Okay, that came back to the heart. But that's why they just have thin wall compared to ventricle. So ventricle have thicker wall than atria. Specifically, left ventricle have thicker wall compared to the right ventricle because it need to contract more forcefully blood, right? A higher force of blood compared to the right ventricle and atria because the blood will be pumped to the rest of the body. That is why the left ventricle have thicker wall compared to the right ventricle. Okay, right. So I guess there is no problem for you to understand this, okay? Okay, so the heart is covered with a soft tissue that we call as pericardium. So it is a kind of connective tissue lah. Okay, pericardium. So pericardium is sort of like protective layer that protect the heart. Okay. Okay, and this is the pathway of blood through the heart, right? Starting from the vena cava to the right atrium, from the right atrium to the right ventricle via tricuspid valve, right? Then from the right ventricle, then the blood will be flow out to the pulmonary artery via pulmonic valve, right? Or pulmonary valve or semilunar valve, sama je. All right. So then the blood return back to the heart from pulmonary vein. Okay. And then flow into the left atrium and then to the left ventricle via mitral valve, or we call as just now bicuspid valve, right? Or atrioventricular valve. And then from the left ventricle, it will pump out to the aorta via aortic valve or semilunar valve, right? Okay. So that is the general idea on how our heart is working and how the blood flows within the heart. Okay. Next one. Okay. So this is very new knowledge to you, right? The cardiac cycle. So describe cardiac cycle, including the changes that happen in terms of the blood pressure during systole and also diastole. So what is systole means? Systole means contraction. And diastole means relaxation. Okay, what is happened to the pressure of blood in the heart chamber when the heart is relaxed or when it is contracting, right? So this will be explained in cardiac cycle. Okay, right. So what is cardiac cycle? Cardiac cycle is sequence of event that happen in every one heartbeat. Maksudnya dalam satu detak jantung, apa yang akan berlaku kepada jantung kita. Right? Starting from receiving the blood, pumping the blood, and so on. Okay, right. So it involves repeated contraction and relaxation of the heart. So the contraction or pumping phase is given as systole, right? Whereby the relaxation state or filling phase referred as diastole. Okay, all right. So human at rest has pulse or heart rate at averagely 72 beats per minute. So remember, this heart rate will be vary among people. So usually the normal resting heart rate is maybe around 60 to 75 beats per minute, right? So it varies lah. So if someone have 72 beat per minute heart rate, so to complete one cardiac cycle, it requires 0.8 second. Okay, so how to get this 0.8 second? Anyone? Ada, right? So to get the duration of one complete cycle of cardiac cycle is 60 seconds divided by heart rate. Okay, so if your heart rate is 72, so 60 divided by 72, then you get 0.8 plus plus plus. So roughly 0.8 second. So if you are doing exercise, technically your heart rate will increase. So duration to complete one cardiac cycle will be much more faster. So in other words, one complete cycle will become less than 0.8 second. Why? Because you are in needs of more oxygen, right? So your heart need to beat faster. So in other words, the cardiac cycle need to be more frequent and faster. Okay, right. Okay, so pulse. Pulse is the rhythmic bulging of the artery wall with each heartbeat. So the cardiac cycle is divided into three phases. The first one, atrial systole and ventricular diastole, the first phase, which took around 0.1 second. Okay, the second phase is, all right, before that, atrial systole, meaning atrial or atrium is contracting. Right? Ventricular diastole means your ventricle is relaxed. So that is somehow idea on what happened to the atrium and ventricle at different phase. Okay. Second phase, ventricular systole and atrial diastole. So ventricle contracting, atrial in the relaxing or what we call it, filling phase. So this took around 0.3 second. Okay, and then atrial and ventricular diastole, 0.4 seconds. So altogether 0.8 seconds. Okay, so these are the three phases. Okay, now let's go into the detail of each phase. All right, atrial systole, ventricular diastole. So this is what we are going to focus on. Atrial systole, you can see this picture. Your atria is actually filled or filled with blood, right? And your atria contract. So as your atria contract, the blood then will be flow into the ventricle. Right? Okay, something that you have to focus here in cardiac cycle. In cardiac cycle, you have to focus on where the blood flow, right? Which valve that is open or closed. And you also might be focused on the pressure. All right, so now let's see this first, atrial systole and ventricular diastole. So both atria contract simultaneously. So both atria contract. So what is the purpose of this atria contract? Seolah-olah macam atria macam tu, contract. Kenapa dia contract? So the purpose is to force all remaining blood from the atria to be emptied into ventricle. Maksudnya to make sure that atria is empty. 0.1 saat je masa yang diperlukan to ensure atria or atrium is empty. Emptied what? Emptied with blood. So meaning to say, all the remaining blood has been forced, right, into the ventricle. So kita nak atria kita jadi kosong. So this is what happened in 0.1 second. And your ventricle is in the relaxation mode. That's why it can receive all the blood that coming from the atria. Okay, so this is the first phase, 0.1 second, atrial systole and ventricular diastole. Okay, which valve is open? Which valve is still open during this stage? Anyone? The valve that still remains open is AV valve. You can see AV valve is still open to allow the blood from the atria flows into the ventricle. Okay. All right. Okay, next. Okay, so you can see this picture showing you the AV valve that is open. So the blood from the atria flows into the ventricle. Okay, right. Next one, second stage, ventricular systole and atrial diastole. Ventricular systole, the ventricle will contract and atria will relax. All right, so remember just now, we are in this stage. Now we are moving to this one. Okay, so remember just now atrial systole forced blood into the ventricle. So what happened into the ventricle, right? So the ventricle will be full with blood. And what happened to the atria? The atria then will be relaxed. Okay, so blood will start to fill up into the atria. Then atria will contract. Why does why does ventricle contract? Okay, so again, atrial will be relaxed, so it will be filled with blood, right? Ventricle will contract. So why ventricle contract? Ventricle contract because the pressure of blood inside the ventricle is higher compared to the pressure inside atria. Darah dah masuk dalam ventricle, so pressure dalam ventricle lagi tinggi. So you have high pressure here and low pressure here. Okay, so when there is high pressure in the ventricle compared to the atria, this will force the AV valve to close. Okay, when the AV valve is closed, tutup je macam tu, right? It will produce a sound. Okay, that is the loop sound. The first heart sound. So heart sound kita loop, doop, ya, bukan duk dak dik duk dup 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 dup. No, right? So the heart sound is loop doop loop doop. Right? So when the AV valve is closed, tutup je AV valve, you have the first sound and that indicates your heart will contract. Ventricle will contract. Sebab valve dah tutup kan? Valve tutup je, ventricle contract. So when the ventricle contract, where does the blood flows to? So the blood from the ventricle then will be transported into the arteries, into the aorta and also pulmonary artery. All right. So why does, okay, next question is why this AV valve is closed? So the AV valve is closed because the pressure inside the ventricle is higher than the atria. Okay, betul. Satu. Lagi satu, kenapa dia kena tutup? So the AV valve is closed to prevent the blood returning to the atria. So in other words, to prevent backflow of blood. So AV valve tutup, so kita tak nak darah dalam ventricle patah balik masuk dalam atrium. So that is why the AV valve is closed. Alright. So meanwhile, okay, meanwhile, remember the pressure in the ventricle is higher compared to the pressure in the arteries. Right? So when ventricle contract, so pressure inside the ventricle is higher compared to the pressure in the aorta and pulmonary artery. So then that makes semilunar valve will be open. So blood will pump into the large arteries. Okay. So here are two things that you have to captured. The first one is the changes of pressure between ventricle and atrium. The second one is the changes of pressure between ventricle and arteries. Right? So then you can explain what which valve is closed, which valve is open, right? And then where the blood flows into. Okay? All right. And so now our blood is here in the arteries, in the aorta and pulmonary arteries. Okay? Right. Okay. So you can see this one showing you the closing of AV valve. Okay, so it happened when the ventricle contract, right? And pressure rises inside the ventricle. And this one showing you the opening of the semilunar valve. As the ventricle contract and blood will be pumped out to the arteries, aorta and pulmonary artery. Okay, right. That is the second stage. Okay, third stage. So just now, the second stage accomplished in 0.3 second. Okay, now let's go to the remaining 0.4 second. Atrial and ventricular diastole. Okay, remember just now in previous phase, ventricle contract. So blood is pumped into the aorta and pulmonary artery. Right. So next one, what will happen to your ventricle? Your ventricle will relax, return to the relaxation state, or we call as diastole. Okay, right. Both atria and ventricle relax. Thus, blood return from the large veins flows into the atria. So then blood from vena cava and also pulmonary vein, all right, return the blood back into the heart. Okay, right. Next, what happened? Pressure rises inside the atria, right? So pressure in the atria is higher compared to the pressure inside the ventricle. So remember, atria diastole. So atria receive blood from the large vein. So pressure inside the atria will increase and compared to the pressure inside the ventricle. Okay, so as pressure inside the atria is higher compared to pressure inside the ventricle, AV valve will open. So this is the first thing that happened. Okay, so you can see pressure inside here is higher compared to the pressure inside the, sini. Pressure inside the atria is higher compared to the pressure inside the ventricle. Okay, right. Okay, salah. Ni gambar ni dia explain terbalik. Ayat explain terbalik. Okay, tak apa. Dia tengok gambar. So, pressure in here, atria is higher compared to the pressure inside the ventricle. So, you can see AV valve will be open. Okay, so blood from the atria then flows into the ventricle. Okay, right. At the same time, remember our blood, as the ventricle contract, the blood now is in the large arteries. Kan? Dah sampai dekat dalam large arteries dah. So what happened? The pressure inside the large arteries is higher compared to the pressure inside the ventricle. Okay, at the same time, pressure in the aorta and pulmonary artery is higher compared to the pressure inside the ventricle. So what happened? This will cause the semilunar valve to close. Why semilunar valve close? Right? Semilunar valve close to prevent the blood from flowing back or return back to the ventricle. Okay, so as semilunar valve is closed, it will produce the second sound, the doop sound. Okay, right? So that is the explanation behind what happened in every one single heartbeat, which just takes around 0.8 seconds, okay, to complete. Okay, so now let's see the significance behind the loop sound and also the doop sound. Okay, so the loop sound is produced due to the closing of AV valve. So ingat balik, loop jadi sebab AV valve close. The loop sound produced masa stage yang keberapa ya? Masa stage yang pertama ke, phase yang kedua ke, phase yang ketiga ke? Right, waktu bila tu kita panggil? Anyone?
Second.
Ventricular?
Systole.
Yes, very good.
Atrial diastole.
Yes, ventricular systole and atrial diastole. Right. So what is the what we call it signal by having this sound, or by the closing of the AV valve? It actually mark the beginning of ventricular systole. So tutup je AV valve, your heart will start to contract. Okay, right? So the loop sound mark the beginning of ventricular contraction or ventricular systole. As for the doop sound, okay, the doop sound is caused by the closing of semilunar valve during the atrial and ventricular diastole. All right, so the closing of the semilunar valve indicates the beginning of ventricular diastole. So tutup the semilunar valve, maka ventricle akan start to relax and fill with blood. Okay, right. So what kind of question that you might be asked in exam? You might be given different phases, not in sequence. And the question might be asking you what happened at this event, and so on. Or maybe the question just give you one of the 3 events and ask you to identify what event is that, depending on the condition of the valve or depending on the contraction that you can see of the ventricular wall, all right? Or maybe just they give you changes of pressure, data related to pressure. Then you have to identify which stage is that. And the question will ask you to explain what happened next and so on. Okay, that is example of question that can relate to cardiac cycle. Yeah, okay. So that's why picture is very important. You have to identify and understand this picture showing you ventricular systole, right? And then this somehow, this kind of picture nampak macam dia kembang sikit ke tu, that showing you diastole. So you have to understand pictures, okay? Right. Okay, next one. Right? Sometimes the heart can produce another sound instead of loop and doop, right? You will actually hear, unusual sound, right? Or hissing sound. Sometimes it is hissing sound. Sometimes it is a washing sound. Whoosh, 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 macam tu, right? And some other sounds. So this detectable sound is actually indicates that blood leaking back through a defective valve. Meaning to say there is a defective valve which caused this kind of sound to be produced. So this condition we call as heart murmur. Jangan murmur, okay? Heart murmur, okay? Right. So heart murmur happen due to defective valve or valve that is not closed properly. For example, you can see from this picture, right? So this valve is not closed properly. So then it can it actually will cause backflow of blood, right? And then produce this kind of what we call it unusual sound. Okay, all right. So that is just for your information related to heart murmur. Okay. All right. Any questions so far? Okay, no. Okay. So let's continue, right? So next we go to cardiac output. So what is cardiac output and what calculation related to cardiac output? Okay, right. What is cardiac output? So cardiac output is the volume of blood that the left ventricle pump into the aorta for every minute. And it given as this formula, which you have to hafal, not given in exam. Cardiac output is given as stroke volume times heart rate. Okay, remember heart rate will be vary. So jangan ingat 72 aja. So you have to follow your data given if let's say this question come out in exam. Okay, right. What is stroke volume? So stroke volume is the volume of blood pumped by a ventricle for every single contraction. So for every contraction of ventricle, berapa darah yang keluar tu kita panggil stroke volume. Average stroke volume for adult is around 70 ml. Okay, 70 ml per stroke. Sekali ventricle kita contract dalam 70 ml. 70 ml tu lagi sikit daripada perfume 100 ml kan. Okay, right. So the heart rate is the number of heart atau pulse or beat per minute. Alright. So let's say by having our data just now, we have the person with heart rate 72 beats per minute. Alright. And the average stroke volume is 70 ml per stroke. So thus the cardiac output means the amount of blood, the volume of blood pumped by the left ventricle for every minute is given as 70 times 72 beats per minute. Then you will get around 5.04 liter of blood in 1 minute. So you just imagine without fail, Alhamdulillah, until now, our heart is still do its job, right? To beat and to pump the blood through throughout our body without fail. For every minute, 5 liter of blood is pumped. You just imagine for 1 hour, seminggu ataupun sepanjang hayat yang you ada sekarang lah, berapa umur awak kan? So setakat ni, right? It is still there. beat for you for us to beat for us to survive. Okay, right. But let's say if you are under stress or you are doing heavy exercise, your cardiac output will increase 20 to 30 liter per minute, which is 5-fold from the resting what we call it, cardiac output. Of course lah, betul lah kan, right? Because when you are doing exercise, your body needs more oxygen carried in the blood. So your heart need to pump the blood more. So in other words, your cardiac output will be increase very, very high. Okay, right? Okay, next. The next question is, what regulates the heart rhythm? Why when we are resting, our heart beats accordingly? Macam ni contohnya. Contoh lah, right? But as we are doing exercise or we are under stress, the heart beats faster. Why? So what regulate that and what initiate that to occur? Okay, so this is what we are going to learn, and we are going to relate the what we call it, initiation of the heart rhythm to ECG or EKG, electrocardiogram. All right, so this is the idea on how our heart is able to beat, all right, and following the rhythm. So that is due to the presence of this one, sinoatrial node. Okay, the next one is AV node. And all these, the yellow fibers that you can see, which we are going to discuss kejap lagi, right? So you can see from here, sinoatrial node release signal, which will spread to the wall of atria, which cause later the atria to be contract and so on. The signal then you can see it passed down to the heart apex. Right? So the signal that you can see from here is electrical signal. Okay? Ataupun kita panggil impulse. Right. Okay. Some cardiac muscle are self-excitable. So kita punya sel-sel jantung ni adalah jenis yang able to contract without any control or any signal from the central nervous system or from the brain. Okay, so maksudnya jantung kita ni boleh berdetak sendiri tanpa arahan daripada otak. That's why later, maybe you might be experience this later when you dissect a rat, you will found out that even though you have cut open the rat, you dah buraikan usus dia bagai, right? Dah godak-godak macam-macam. When you cut open the rib cage, you can still see the heart is still beating. Jangan you menggelabah pula nanti. Madam, tikus ni hidup lagi lah sebenarnya. Tak, right? So the cardiac muscle cell is self-excitable. Alright, ataupun macam drama kan, kita doktor cakap, Encik, minta maaf, saudara Encik ni ke apa ke dah meninggal dunia. Kita pun tak percaya. Saya dengar ni dada dia masih lagi, jantung dia macam berbunyi apa semua kan. That is not. Right? That is because of the cardiac muscle cell are self-excitable. As long as your brain does not produce signal, you are considered dead already. Okay, right. Okay, so cardiac muscle cell is self-excitable. It can contract without any signal from the nervous system. This is due to the presence of the sinoatrial node, or we call as SA node. Make sure capital S, capital A. Okay, SA node, or we call as the pacemaker. Iron Man pun ada pacemaker kan? So this is the original pacemaker, right? Okay, that is located in the wall of the right atrium. Okay, so the SA node set the rate and timing which all the cardiac muscle will contract. So sinoatrial node ni lah yang akan initiate how the heart cell will beat or contract. Okay, sorry, how the heart cell can contract. Okay, right. Okay, so this is the structure, right? So we have here the sinoatrial node, right, at the wall of the right atrium. And we have here the atrioventricular node, or we call as AV node. Okay. All right. And then we have here is bundle of His, right? That later on will send the signal to the apex of heart. Apex tu maksudnya dia hantar signal ke tunjang jantung. Tunjang ke apex. Macam hujung sekali tu. Right. So itu. And then next is Purkinje fiber. So you can see here the smaller branches of fiber here that going through the wall of ventricle. We call it as Purkinje fibers. Okay. All right. Okay. Next. Type of heart. There are two types of heart. Myogenic heart and neurogenic heart. Ada dua jenis jantung. Okay. So for us and some other vertebrate animals, so we have myogenic heart. Myogenic heart means the pacemaker is made of specialized tissue and it is located within the heart itself. Maknanya pacemaker is located in the heart or within the heart. Itu kita panggil myogenic heart. But if neurogenic heart, the pacemaker is located in the nervous system. Pacemaker bukan duduk dalam jantung, tapi duduk dalam nervous system. And it is found in most arthropods. What are example of arthropods? They are include scorpion, contohlah. Okay, scorpion, spiders. Alright, so these are example of arthropods that have neurogenic heart. Okay, so that is the difference between myogenic and neurogenic. Okay, alright. Next one. What factors influence the pace of SA node? Faktor yang mempengaruhi pace, ialah kadar kerjanya the SA node. Alright, so first, two set of nerve with antagonist signal. Ada dua jenis nerve, two set of nerve that work in antagonistic ways, which known as sympathetic nerve and parasympathetic nerve. So you can read down there, sympathetic nerve is a network of nerve that help your body to initiate or to activate fight or flight responses, right? Or in other words, sympathetic nerve is the one that will influence ataupun induce mobilization of energy during fight or flight. For example, when you are chased by a dog, you kena kejar anjing. You kena kejar anjing, your sympathetic nerve will be activated. So one of the action of sympathetic nerve is it will increase your heart rate. Sebab kita nak lari kan. So bila kita nak lari, kita perlu banyak oxygen, right? So it will increase your heart rate. As for parasympathetic, right? Parasympathetic is a network of nerve that relax your body after period of stress or danger. So in other words, parasympathetic nerve usually promoting calmness and relaxation. Okay, alright. Contoh, lepas makan. Lepas makan, kita akan rasa mula mengantuk. Kenapa mengantuk? Because parasympathetic nerve reduce the heart rate. Right. So to promote relaxation. Okay. Right. So that is the first factors that influence the activity of SA node. Okay. Okay. Second one, hormone. Okay. Hormone, for example, epinephrine or adrenaline. Right? So this hormone is secreted from the adrenal gland. So this is the adrenal gland. Adrenal gland is located just above the kidney. Ini kita punya kidney. Adrenal gland is here. Right? So adrenal gland secreted by the adrenaline secreted by adrenal gland. And one of the function of adrenaline is to increase the heart rate during fight or flight. Okay, sebab tu orang kata adrenaline rush. Itu dia. Adrenaline rush maksudnya your heart rate is increased. Kan? Okay. Right. Ataupun you jumpa you punya crush you lalu depan you je, terus jatuh yang macam tercabut tu kan. So increase your heart rate. Okay. So your SA node will be activity of SA node or pace of SA node is increased. Okay. Next, number 3 is body temperature. So an increase of 1 degree Celsius of body temperature will cause your heart rate to increase about 10 beats per minute. For example, when you are doing exercise or when you are having fever. Kalau perasan, bila kita demam, heart rate kita tinggi. Lagi senang nak nampak, you tengok baby cukup lah. Bila baby demam, kita pegang je sikit dada dia, kita dah rasa dah dia punya lajunya pace of the heart, right? Due to the increased activity of the SA node. Okay, right. But in exercise, of course, we know in exercise we are actually orang kata apa, in need of more oxygen. So of course the heart rate will increase. That is why the pace of SA node increase to increase the heart rate. Okay, right. And the last factor is exercise. Of course lah, exercise will increase the activity of SA node. Okay, right. So these are 4 factors that influence the pace of SA node. Okay. All right. Okay. Next one is the control of heart rhythm. Right. So now kita nak pergi fahamkan macam mana this SA node functioning, which then allowing the atria or the ventricle to contract. Okay. So this is what we call as control of heart rhythm. Okay. So take your 5 minutes break first. All right. 5 minutes break. Then we will continue with the control of heart rhythm. Okay. Take 5. Okay, let's continue, right? So now we are in the control of heart rhythm, okay? Right, so you can see from here, the yellow signal is actually, the yellow coloration is actually representing the signal from the SA node. So SA node spread electrical signal. So dia seolah-olah macam mengeluarkan electrical impulse, okay? So that electrical impulse or signal will be spread to the wall of atria, both atria, and cause the atria to contract. All right, as if like you just imagine this is the what we call it SA node. So when SA node spread the signal, right, it spread to the wall of both atria and later on cause the atrial to contract. So when in ECG, right, you will see this wave. All right, in ECG, you will see this wave. So this is indicating that the electrical signal has been spread to the wall of atria and caused the atrial to contract. Okay, right. Next one. Okay, so the signal then reach to the next node. Okay, the signal spread to the wall of atria and then it sampai dekat reaching to the AV node. Alright, so the signal then will be delayed at the AV node. Signal tu akan terhenti sekejap dekat AV node. Why? Signal tu terstop sekejap dekat AV node. That is to make sure atrial, okay, atrial or atrium is empty. That is why in the cardiac cycle you have 0.1 second time where the atrial will contract, right? To make sure that all the blood has been emptied into the ventricle. So before the ventricle contract, that's why the signal will be stopped a little bit of maybe around 0.1 second. That's why in here in ECG, you will see the line to be stagnant like that for a short period of time. No electrical activity. Dia straight je macam tu. Kalau orang tu mati, dia terus macam tu je. Right? So this is for a very short period of time. So this actually signal you that the AV node is delayed at the, the signal is delayed for a moment at the AV node. Okay, next, the signal then will spread down to the bundle of His towards the apex of heart. Impulse akan dihantar ke bawah, alright, to the apex of heart via bundle of His. Alright, so this is where you will see this very small curve ataupun electrical activity. Okay, right. And the next, the signal then will spread up to the ventricle via Purkinje fiber. So daripada heart apex, electrical signal then will spread upward to the wall of ventricle and cause the ventricle to contract. All right, then you have this wave. So this wave indicates ventricular systole. Okay, right? So this is how the initiation of heart rhythm is happen and how it relates to the electrocardiogram or ECG. Okay, right. So to understand ECG, each curve or each lines represent by names or alphabet. So the first one that you have is the P wave, right? Remember P wave tu jadi masa bila? Tadi, when the SA node spread the signal to the wall of atria, which caused the atrial to contract. So this P wave indicate contraction of atrium, or we call as depolarization of atrium. Madam, depolarization of atrium tu apa? It's something related to the movement or changes of voltage across the membrane. So we are going to detail out the term depolarization, repolarization later on in chapter 5. Right? So as for now, you can understand that this wave indicates or representing contraction of atrium. Okay, next wave is we have QRS wave, QRS. So this QRS complex indicate contraction of ventricle, or we call as ventricular depolarization. All right, so when the signal has spread up to the bundle Purkinje fiber to the wall of ventricle. All right, and then the next wave is over here, T wave. So T wave indicates ventricular repolarization. So in other words, ventricular relaxation. We can understand it as relaxation phase. Or filling phase of ventricle, right? Okay, so this is what you have in a every single heartbeat, right? You have PQRST, then following PQRST, right? But the frequency will be different according to your health condition. If you are having higher cardiac output, your wave will be more frequent compared to the normal one. Okay, all right. So you will learn this detail later in your degree, inshallah. Okay, right. So you can see during atrial systole, you have the P wave over here, right? So when you are reaching to the ventricular systole, you will have the QRS wave. And as it reach to atrial and ventricular diastole, then you will have the T wave. Okay, right. Next. Okay, again, the same picture, PQRS and T. Okay. Okay, next we go to the structure and function of the blood vessel. Okay, the artery, veins, and capillary. Okay. All right. So you have a picture that you can refer to textbook page 1005. So this one showing you the structure of artery, cross-section of artery, vein, and also capillary, right? So you can see that both artery and vein has 3 layers of tissue. Okay, 3 layers of tissue, the outer layer, the middle layer, and also the inner layer. But you can see very clear over here that the artery have thicker outer layer and also middle layer compared to vein. Okay, right. So artery, smaller branches of smaller branches of artery we call as arteriole. Okay, and then arteriole will sub branch into numerous capillary beds, right? And smaller branch of vein we call as venule. Okay, right. Next one, you can see here the outer layer of the artery is composed of connective tissue, similar to what you can find in vein. Okay, the middle layer composed of smooth muscle, right? And inner layer is confined with endothelium. Okay, right. So let's go into the detail. Wall of artery and vein have three similar layers. Outer layer, all right, or some book stated as tunica externa, externa. Okay, right. So the outside layer or the outer layer we call as tunica externa. So the tunica externa composed of connective tissue with elastic fiber and collagen fiber. So the elastic fiber will make the vessel is stretchable. So it can stretch and recoil. And the collagen fiber provides strength and also resilient. Okay, right. As for the middle layer, so the middle layer contain smooth muscle and a lot of elastic fiber. Okay, so what is the purpose of having smooth muscle in the middle layer of the blood vessel? So the smooth muscle, kita dah faham apa function smooth muscle. So it will cause involuntary action, which allow the vessel to contract, right, in a small scale, but for a longer period of time. So in other words, to allow prolonged, slow contraction. Alright, maksudnya even though when the vessel is relaxed, dia still lagi boleh contract slowly so that the blood can flow efficiently, and a lot more elastic fiber to maintain ataupun to provide elasticity. Okay, and middle layer also known as tunica media. Okay, right? And the next one is inner layer or inner lining known as tunica interna or tunica intima. Okay, tunica. Okay, tunica interna or tunica intima. Okay, so the inner layer or inner lining of lumen is made of endothelium, which is a single layer of flattened cell, right, attached to the basal layer ataupun basement membrane, where the function is to minimize resistance for the blood to flow. Minimize resistance, mengurangkan rintangan, right? Rintangan for the blood to flow within the vessels. So that is why it is made of flattened cells. Okay. Okay. So arteries have thicker. Why artery have thicker and middle layer compared to vein? That is because to accommodate high pressure of blood that pump from the heart. So remember, artery that we refer here is aorta. Okay. Kita refer kepada aorta lah, for example, aorta and pulmonary artery. So they are pumping high pressured blood out of the heart. So to accommodate this high pressure, they need thicker middle layer and outer layer. Okay, right. So their elasticity can help to maintain the blood pressure even when the heart is relaxed. So the elasticity can cause the blood vessel to stretch and recoil so that it can maintain the blood pressure. Okay. Okay, so flows of blood in the vein. In the thinner walled vein, blood can flow back to the heart due to skeletal muscle contraction. Okay, all right. For example, remember, vein that we refer here is vena cava, right? And then pulmonary vein, contoh. Okay, so these veins collect the blood ataupun sending the blood back to the heart. So what makes the vein can help in the flow of blood back to the heart, right? So that is due to the action of skeletal muscle. Contoh, when you are in a marching, marching ataupun you are stand still for a long period of time. Bila kita berdiri tegak lama ataupun kita tengah berkawat ke, remember the coach ataupun kita penjurulatih akan cakap, okay, move your toes even though you are standing still. Gerakkan kaki, gerakkan kaki. Bukan kaki, gerakkan jari. Move your toes. Kenapa? When you are moving your toes, you are actually contracting your skeletal muscle of your foot. Right? So when your skeletal muscle contract, it can actually help for the blood to flow back down from the foot back to the heart. Okay, right. So within a larger vein, there are flaps of tissue that acts one way of valve, right? So untuk vein-vein yang besar, right? So biasanya dia ada associated tambahan lah. Dia ada valve. Untuk vein-vein yang kecil, contoh dekat kaki kita kan, dekat bawah tu, biasanya it just requires skeletal muscle contraction. Okay. Okay. Capillary. Okay, so capillary is just made of endothelial cell, right, and basement membrane, and the purpose is to enhance gases exchange. All right, so it is made of latent cell because it want to reduce resistance for the blood to flow. Okay, so this picture here showing you a clear difference between cross section of artery and also vein, where artery have thicker outer and middle layer compared to vein. And in terms of lumen, you can see that lumen of vein is larger or bigger lumen compared to artery. Okay, for lumen, all right. So sometime in exam, it will give you cross section of artery vein, contohnya lah, right? And they will ask you question related to the different and then explain and whatnot. Macam itulah, okay? Right. Comparison of blood vessels, okay, between artery, veins, and capillary. So you can see artery have thick, smooth muscle tissue compared to vein. Smooth muscle tissue found in which layer? Outer layer, middle layer, inner layer?
Middle layer.
Middle layer. Okay. All right. While elastic tissue can be found in both outer layer and middle layer. So artery also have abundance of elastic tissue compared to vein. Right? So in terms of lumen of vein is larger compared to artery. Right? And in terms of blood pressure, right? The blood pressure of artery is higher and low in both capillary and also vein. All right. Question here. The blood pressure of the blood that flows in the vein is low. But what makes the blood can still flow within the vein back to the heart?
The presence of the valve.
Apa? Again?
Ada valve kat vein.
Ada valve. Okay, lagi satu. Kurang tepat. Valve tu kurang tepat. Sekarang kita cakap pasal blood pressure. Blood pressure is low in the vein. But what makes blood can still flow in the vein?
Result of skeletal muscle action.
Skeletal muscle action. Okay, sebab valve hanya ada pada valve vein-vein yang besar je, kan? Alright, so kita cakap secara general in all of our vein. What makes blood can flow in the vein despite the low blood pressure? So the main answer is due to the contraction of skeletal muscle. Okay, right. So valve also can be one of the reason, but the main reason is the contraction of skeletal muscle lah. Yeah. Okay. Valve. Okay, valve can be found in the valve found in the larger vein we call as venous valve, and for artery, valve can be found in aorta and pulmonary artery only, which we call as semilunar valve. Okay, and in terms of function, artery function to transport blood away from the heart, right? Away from the heart, while vein transport the blood back to the heart. Okay, and capillary involved in exchange of material between blood and extracellular fluid. Okay, right. So that is a summary to compare the blood vessel, the 3 different blood vessels. Okay. Okay, next. Next we go to blood pressure, tekanan darah. What is blood pressure? So blood pressure is force or hydrostatic pressure that is exerted by the blood against the inner wall of blood vessel. Okay, so the blood pressure is influenced by cardiac output, blood volume, and peripheral resistance, halangan ataupun rintangan. Okay, right. Now let's see how cardiac output influence the blood pressure. Right, the higher the cardiac output, for example, you are doing exercise, the higher the blood flow, right? So the blood flow will increase, then increase your blood pressure, right? But when the cardiac output is low, so blood flow will decrease, so decrease the blood pressure. Okay, so in terms of blood volume, right? Let's say the blood volume decrease, jumlah darah berkurang disebabkan oleh beberapa faktor like chronic bleeding, excessive bleeding, hemorrhage, alright, macam apa yang berlaku masa accident contohnya, in operation theatre contohnya, alright, so injuries can cause the blood volume to be decreased. So decrease in blood volume will lower the blood flow in the blood vessel, then reduce your blood pressure. That is why when someone is excessively bleeds, you have to try stop the bleeding. Why? So to stop the bleeding is actually helping to what we call it, slow down the dropping in terms of blood pressure. Kan? Macam itulah. Okay. And number 3 is peripheral resistance. So peripheral resistance is the resistance for the blood to flow. Halangan untuk darah mengalir dalam blood vessel. And this is caused by viscosity, kelikatan darah, and due to friction between the blood and the blood vessel. Okay, ada 2 condition kat sini. Maksudnya blood pressure yang blood pressure influenced by the blood flow and also peripheral resistance. Okay, berkaitan dengan peripheral resistance juga. Okay, so the peripheral resistance is influenced by or caused by blood viscosity, right? Salah satu contohnya. So viscosity ialah kelikatan darah. Ada orang darah dia likat sikit. Contoh, patient or person with hypertension, right? Biasanya darah dia sedikit likat sebab banyak sangat solid lah, makan ubat, air kurang dan sebagainya kan. Okay, so blood become a little bit viscous. That's why doktor akan bagi dia ubat cair darah. Itulah contohnya. Okay, so let's say if the blood viscosity increase, kelikatan darah meningkat, darah semakin likat, so it will increase peripheral resistance. So when peripheral resistance increase, blood pressure, it will affect the blood pressure. So biasanya blood pressure will increase. Sebab banyak halangan, ada halangan tapi darah nak lalu. So dia akan give more pressure to the wall of the blood vessel. So pressure will increase. Okay. Another condition is vasoconstriction. Vasoconstriction means you are reducing the diameter of your blood vessel. Okay. Pengecilan diameter blood vessel. So when your blood vessel is vasoconstricted, right? The diameter decrease, of course, resistance will increase. So vasoconstriction, maksudnya you reduce the diameter, so peripheral resistance will increase blood pressure. Okay, right? All right. Next is in terms of what we have discussed earlier, the blood flow. The higher the cardiac output, the higher the blood flow, the higher the blood pressure. Right? Next, the lower the blood volume, the lower the blood flow, the lower the blood pressure. Okay, that is to summarize the relation between peripheral resistance and also blood flow due to certain factors. Okay, right. Okay, so now let's go to the detail about vasoconstriction. So vasoconstriction is the constriction of blood vessel, which to reduce the diameter of the blood vessel. So when we reduce the diameter of blood vessel, the friction between the blood and the blood vessel will increase. So pressure will increase. Okay, and dilation of blood vessel is referred to vasodilation, where when blood vessel is dilated, all right, the friction between the blood and the blood vessel will reduce, so blood pressure will decrease. Okay, so this vasoconstriction and vasodilation related to the BP reading, blood pressure reading kita, where it's given as systolic pressure over diastolic pressure. So in this machine, you have here bacaan atas systolic pressure, bacaan yang bawah tu diastolic pressure. So systolic pressure tu apa maksud dia? Right? So you can see systolic pressure means the pressure in the artery during ventricular systole. Pressure darah dalam artery, right? When the ventricle is contract. So we are going to measure the pressure by constricting the blood vessel. Kan kita pakai cuff tu. The cuff will actually put pressure to reduce the diameter of your blood vessel. Dan kita akan kira berapa pressure darah yang lalu pada masa tersebut bila once the cuff is released. Right? Berapa pressure? So that is the highest pressure, which refers to the systolic pressure. Okay, and when the blood vessel is fully dilated, so the pressure of blood flow during that particular time is given as the diastolic pressure. Okay, so systolic pressure is the highest pressure in the artery, right? Because it came from the contraction of the ventricle, and diastolic pressure is the pressure in the artery during diastole. Okay, right? And this blood pressure is measured by sphygmomanometer. So you have manual sphygmomanometer or you have the digital one, kan, to measure the blood pressure. And normal blood pressure reading is 120/70 mm Hg. Okay, right. So I want to show you one reading. Contoh lah, this person, the BP is 160/110. So you can see that the pressure of the blood during ventricular systole is 160, meaning the pressure is very, very high. Somehow it might be, can be diagnosed or can be, one reference, inference that can be given. Maybe there are a lot of, ada some deposition to the wall of the blood vessel, which cause increase in terms of resistance. Right, resistance bertambah, so pressure akan makin naik. Alright, and then you can see here, right, when the heart is relaxed, the pressure in the blood vessel is still very, very high. Right, 110. So this is also indicate that might be there are blockage ataupun deposition of fat within the blood vessel. Okay, right. So contoh lah. Okay, next, changes in blood pressure. Okay, perubahan blood pressure in the artery, veins, and capillary. Okay, so the orange color over here showing you the artery. So we have the very large one is aorta. So aorta will branches into other small branches of artery, kan? Okay, and then arteries will sub branch into arteriole. So that's why you can see here more branches over here. right? So let's say pressure kat sini 10. So bila sampai dekat artery, mestilah pressure dia kena bahagi 3 kan? So ni 3.3, 3.3, 3.3 contohnya. As it sub-branch into arterial, so kena bahagi lagi pressure dia. So you can see that the pressure will decreasing as it move along from the artery to the vein. Okay, artery to the capillary and to the vein. So the purple color showing you the beds of network of capillaries. You can see there are numerous number of capillary over there, right? And then here is the vein. The blue color is vein. Okay, so you can see that blood pressure is highest in aorta and arteries. And the pressure will decrease significantly as it passes through arteriole and capillary. Right, so pressure akan turun. And the lowest pressure is in the vein. Pressure paling rendah dalam vein. So datang balik soalan yang tadi. Pressure paling rendah dalam vein. Jadi macam mana blood can flow within the vein? So the answer is because of contraction of skeletal muscle. Okay, so pressure is very low in the vein because the pressure by pumping of heart is dissipated. Pressure dah hilang dah pun. Sebab bila dia lalu kat branch-branch tu, the pressure is actually decreasing. Alright, so contraction of skeletal muscle squeeze the vein and help to create pressure for the blood to flow within the veins. Okay, alright, so that is explaining why blood can flow within the vein, even it has vein has a very low pressure of blood. Okay. All right. So, and this one is next we go to next LO, list some cardiovascular diseases. List. So the LO is just to list. So you don't have to worry kalau soalan keluar essay, dia takkan keluar essay. Explain atherosclerosis. Tak ada. Okay, alright. So list some cardiovascular disease. So what we focus is atherosclerosis, hypertension, myocardial infarction, stroke, and angina pectoris. So this is atherosclerosis, where you can see they are deposition of fatty tissue, alright, in the inner wall of the blood vessel, which later on will increase resistance or friction between the blood and the blood vessel, which later leads to increase in blood pressure. Okay, so next is hypertension ataupun kita panggil high blood pressure lah kan, or people or person with high blood pressure. So usually hypertension related to atherosclerosis. Okay, alright. Next is myocardial infarction. Myo means muscle, cardial mean heart, right? So myocardial infarction is referred to the death of the heart muscle. Okay, specifically to the heart muscle. Why the heart muscle cell or the heart muscle tissue is dead? That is because some part of the, okay, you can see here, some part of the blood vessel that send the blood to the to the heart tissue is blocked, right? It's blocked by deposition of whatever lah, material or fatty tissue and whatnot. So block, does this particular area not receiving enough oxygen, which at the end of the day, it will die, right? So this myocardial infarction can lead to heart attack. Okay, right? So next one is stroke. Okay, stroke is specifically for the brain tissue. So stroke is the death of the brain tissue. Factor is similar, okay, because the blood vessel that sending the blood to the brain tissue is dead, right? Apa nama ni? The blood vessel that sending the blood to the dead to the brain tissue is blocked. Okay, you can see. So as it is blocked, so that tissue area cannot receive enough oxygen. So it will cause stroke. Okay, and next one is angina pectoris. So angina pectoris is chest pain, right? Chest pain, occasional chest pain. Rasa macam sakit dada ataupun tiba-tiba dada berdebar-debar. chest pain. Alright. So angina pectoris is actually an indicator that you are having blockage in your heart muscle cell ataupun around your heart muscle tissue. Okay, alright. So dia akan start dengan rasa pain, chest pain. Okay, right. Okay, so that is the disorder related to the heart and the blood vessel, okay, that we have discussed. Okay, right. Last but not least, okay, we are in the last few days before end of the Ramadan, right? So in Surah Ar-Ra'du, Allah mentioned that those who believe and whose heart find assurance and peace in the remembrance of Allah, heart will find assurance. Dengan arti kata lain, so dengan mengingati Allah, hati akan menjadi tenang. Alright? This heart, right? Kita cakap pasal heart, hati. So hati ni kita ada refer kepada dua hati, physical heart and spiritual heart. Kan? So dengan mengingati Allah, hati akan menjadi tenang dan assurance, okay, and peace. Also given maybe explaining that your physical heart will be healthy. Banyak baca Quran, banyak berzikir dan sebagainya, mungkin indirectly physical jantung kita pun kita tak stres, kan? Kita tak serabut bila banyak ingat Allah apa semua, physical heart kita pun akan baik. Pada masa yang sama, our spiritual heart also will be baik. Right. But somehow now we are having problem to treat our disease of spiritual heart. Apa penyakit-penyakit yang berkaitan dengan spiritual heart? Penyakit-penyakit berkaitan physical heart kita tahu. Heart attack, angina, atherosclerosis, kita tahu that is the disease of physical heart. What are the disease of spiritual heart? Jealousy. Okay, contoh. Okay. Jealousy. Lagi? Lagi?
Riak.
Riak. Okay. Ujub. Lagi apa? Not being thankful. Right? Tak suka tengok tidak bersyukur, okay? Tak suka jealous tu kan? Tak suka tengok orang lebih kat kita. Itu semua adalah disease of spiritual heart. Walaupun ni bulan Ramadan, syaitan iblis kena ikat, tapi kita still ada rasa benda tu sebagai manusia. Jealous kat orang tu baju cantik sikit daripada kita jealous. Orang tu baju sama dengan kita pun kita jealous, kita tak puas hati, right? So that is the disease of our spiritual heart. Syaitan iblis tak ada untuk bisikkan kejahatan daripada kita, tapi inilah dia peperangan kita sebenarnya dalam bulan Ramadan, berperang untuk mengobati the disease of spiritual heart. Alright? So can you give me ideas on how to treat, or what are the remedies to treat the spiritual heart disease?
Zikir.
Zikir, okay, alright. Lagi? Mana tahu keluar soalan Islamization? Apa dia? Korang jelas. Okay. Tak apa. Apa lagi? Siapa nak type boleh type je. Cepat sikit lagi before we end the class today.
Solat taubat.
Solat taubat. Okay. Lagi? Macam-macam lagi. Right? Syukur. Right? Meaning that be thankful for what you have and not comparing with what other people have. Okay? Lagi apa lagi? Always look at people, less fortunate people, alright? But not looking at the more fortunate people. Okay? So that when we can actually treat our heart not to be having those kind of diseases. Okay? Right? So our heart insyaAllah will find assurance and also peace. Okay? So kita ada lagi berapa? 2 hari, 3 hari lagi. Kan? Atau mungkin 1-2 hari lagi nak puasa kan? Alright. So try our best to treat this kind of spiritual heart disease, okay, so that we can be a better person until the next Ramadan and the next Ramadan. Okay, all right, okay, that is all I guess for today. Any question?